So, hi everyone, I'm Ujjwal, software tester from Brewdown, currently working in Caps, which is fintech company, and I have around 4 years of experience. Apart from software testing, I am quality advocate, and I'm also ambassador at Ministry of Testing, QA-based testing community, and open source contributor. I also usually write articles on Substack and different testing communities like Shipsyn, Ministry of Testing, and other places. This is my portfolio website where all the updates regarding my professional life is been visible, like where I'm going to talk which of my article are published in which community. Okay. And this is my LinkedIn profile. This is my MOT profile where all my MOT related updates are visible. And finally, this is my GitHub profile where all the code for this web series, I mean, for this PyTest automation series will be. Now, thank you everyone for joining this. This is episode 1, and as we continue with future episodes, we will create automation from scratch using PyTest, Selenium, and Python. Now, before starting with the series, let's answer the most basic question: why this series? So there are already plenty of tutorials on YouTube or Udemy teaching about creating PyTest framework. So with this web series, obviously I'm not going to compete with them because this is about documenting my own journey, my own learning, sharing those with the community. And with this series, I will build exactly as I would in a real project. So it might be possible I would make mistake, I would make some wrong decision, but at the end of the day, I will redesign, refactor, and everything live here on YouTube. So with this web series, sorry, I mean series, my goal is learning together, grow together, and instead of pretending to know that we know everything about automation, let's build something and learn something new from the automation framework. So before we start with creating and installing PyTest, let's answer one most important question. Suppose our lead or manager asked us to build an automation framework. So what is the first thing that sorry. So what's the first thing that we will do? Many people will answer like creating folder or installing Selenium or installing PyTest. But is that the right answer? Maybe not. Because before starting with the automation, we need to understand what we need to automate. So automation starts with understanding the problem that we are trying to solve through the automation. And when we try to understand those problems, lots of question arises, like what is the application that we are going to automate, why we are going to automate, what kind of user are using those applications, whether it is UI or mobile or API, how many teams will be involved in the automation, one team, many team, will this run in CI/CD, which browsers will be used for automation, how the test data will be managed, how failures are to be reported to the stakeholders. So these are all the questions that needs to be answered before we start with the automation. Because at the end of the day, our ROI from automation matters. And if we don't have answers for these questions, then obviously ROI is going to be impacted. So when I started learning Python and Selenium, I didn't try to build a perfect framework because obviously that's not possible. Um, because every day there are changes in the PyTest module, or there are changes in the requirement, there are changes in the stakeholder decision that will impact the framework design. And again, teams change, their approach to solve the problem changes. But when the foundation, like architecture of the framework is good, then it can handle most of the issues. Now that we know about the problem, let's talk about the tool. So PyTest, we all know, is open source, but when it comes to PyTest, people think PyTest is a testing framework. It is not. PyTest executes the test. Na Selenium automates browser, and our automation framework is everything around the PyTest. So when we create framework using PyTest, it decide the project structure, configuration, reporting, login, screenshot, like in what kind of format it expect the function or data or reporting, etc. So we can say that PyTest is the engine of framework, and our automation framework is the entire car. So yes, PyTest is driving the car, but engine alone cannot take us anywhere. Now coming to PyTest, why we choose PyTest for automating the framework? Sorry. So we all know PyTest is open source, so it can be easily used. Now, apart from that, it also help us in maintaining cleaner syntax throughout the framework. It has some powerful fixes. It has huge community where we can easily find solutions, and there are lots of plugins also for PyTest, which makes our task very better, or we can say easier. Uh, And when we are going to use PyTest, it helps us solving the problem instead of writing unnecessary code. But knowing the PyTest is not enough. PyTest, as I said, is just the engine. So we usually see people saying that they know PyTest, but Is knowing PyTest just enough for creating the automation framework? Maybe we can create assertion easily. Maybe we can create fixes, or we can also parameterize them. But that's not just PyTest. PyTest is lot more than that, like hooks, plugins, markers, config contest.py, configuration, test discovery, lots of things. Okay. So when it comes to automation, syntax is the easiest part and design is the most difficult part. And that's why architecture of the framework is very important. Now, speaking of the design, from my experience, I've learned something from own failure or mistakes in the hard way. Okay. So when I started with PyTest, I watched lots of tutorial, as I already said in the starting of the video, that there are already lots of tutorials available on YouTube, Udemy, and other platforms. So yes, I watched lots of tutorial for PyTest, and I copied most of the code line by line, just like other automation experience. And I fall in the tutorial hell, but when I review my automation framework, I realized my prompt test.py code was more than 250 line. And even though my framework was working, but I didn't had an idea that what the most of the line was doing in the prompt test.py. So this this was just about prompt test.py. There were already many other files in the framework. And whenever I needed something new, I just add the same fixer or hood based on same pattern. So this was the pattern that I learned from watching tutorial. Okay, but I realized that working code is not just important. Sometimes, some not sometimes, like obviously majority of the time, scaling the framework, maintaining the framework is more crucial. Now coming to the fixer. So fixer in PyTest are quite popular because they are powerful. They offer us many features. There are many kinds of features like login feature, feature, data feature, browser feature. Okay, and eventually every test depends on 5 or 6 features. So so when we are talking about feature, as I already said, the feature in PyTest are very powerful. They offer us lots of features, and there are many feature that we can use, like browser feature, user feature, environment features, data features, and lot many. So eventually, every test depends on these kinds of feature, and debugging become painful when we don't have idea what this feature or hooks or marker are doing in the code. So this was one of the experience. that I realized after copying the code line by line, just creating automation as been shown in the framework. Now coming to the next part of the framework, that is the plugin. Now plugins are something that makes the PyTest amazing. Okay. But again, when I was following those tutorials, I just reached a point where I was just blindly installing the plugins without understanding what they were doing, uh, what exactly those plugins are trying to solve the problem in the automation. Uh, so while using the plugin, it is important to know which plugin we are using and why we are using, what kind of problem it is going to solve. It should not become the architecture. Uh, architecture is the first priority and plugins are the second. Based on architecture, we should select the plugins. Our architecture should not be impacted by the plugin that we had chosen. So now, with obviously there are many lessons, but I just share a couple of them. So how can we avoid these kinds of mistakes? When we go through the tutorials, we can see they share the GitHub repo which says that this folder contains this folder contains this kind of data. But instead of just looking at those folder, we can ask what those folders responsibility are. We know that authentication folder contains the login data, but what responsibility login data is carrying, what kind of operation it is going to perform. Just copying the data blindly and creating framework may not helpful. Okay. Now after plugins, next comes the form. We all aware with the page object model. Okay. So when it comes to pages, form are very crucial for to avoid the centralized approach. We create separate form, separate page object for each of the web page of web application. Okay. So while creating the form, we ensure that adjacencies are on different pages, page interactions are on different file. Sorry, adjacencies are on different files, data on different files. Okay. Now coming to the another folder. So just so these are just brief detail about the PyTest folders. We will go in detail with each of the component as we progress in the automation framework. So so when we follow the form approach, so we create separate files for each web page. Okay. Like if there is login, if there is my profile, if there is dashboard, then we create three files for each web page: login.py, dashboard.py, profile.py. Apart from that, we also have config folder. which contains the configuration environment values. Okay. Then we have utils. Utils contains the reusable helper function that we will use globally throughout the framework. Okay. So the advantage of util is that it avoid writing the duplicate code, uh, and it is as such nothing application specific. Apart from that, utils there is a report section. So report is in a report execution report of our automation framework, like how many tests passed, how many fails, those kinds of detail. Now lots are important in automation framework because it tells us at which point our script failed. Now the next folder that is in the automation framework is the screenshots. So screenshots help us in debugging. With the help of screenshot, we can easily identify at which step script failed. So these are just basic detail. We will go in detail in each folder. Okay, but the important lesson here is that let's not just organize a file. Let's organize the responsibilities. That what folder is going to perform which kind of task and what their responsibilities are. We cannot put the responsibility of lots on reports. So instead of organizing file, organizing responsibility is what defines the architecture. Now let's come to PyTest installation. So if we search PyTest on Google, the official website of PyTest will be visible in the search result. Here we can go and select this command and just run this in our MD. And once we execute this command, the PyTest will be installed. After running this command, if we run this, we can see which version of PyTest is installed on our system. So we will install this tomorrow, and we will also create our folder. Now, for those who are watching this video, just don't build with just don't build the framework line by line, whatever I'm doing. Build with me, but learn the lesson. So before the next session, install the PyTest, create a GitHub repository if you have GitHub account, and push your first commit. I will share the GitHub repo in the comment of the video. Now, before we end this video, what is the biggest problem in your current automation framework? It might be flaky test, or it might be huge cron test.py, or it might be slow execution, or repeated code, difficult maintainability or scalability, or poor project structure. There are lots of things, and this kind of problem varies project to project, teams to teams. So we will use this kind of problem to shape our framework in this series. Okay. Today we didn't write any test, and this was intentional. This was just brief introduction about what we are going to do. We will go in detail with each component. We will also integrate LLM into our framework because integrating AI is now crucial part. So in the next session, we will begin with designing the framework selection and make our first architectural decision. So thank you everyone for joining this and join me and continue with building your framework alongside me. Thank you.